Welcome to the Greater Pensacola Chamber Toddcast, sponsored by Moorhead Real Estate Law Group. On the Toddcast, Chamber President Todd Thompson talks to the leaders that are making a difference and driving the conversations that will impact our community. Now here's the Chamber President, Todd Thompson.
Welcome back to the Greater Pensacola Toddcast. I'm Todd Thompson, President and CEO of the Greater Pensacola Chamber of Commerce. And excited today about our guest. I always enjoy guests that wear a number of different hats and are involved with a lot of different things. And our guest today is someone who is involved throughout our community with a number of different organizations and has a full-time job as well. So I want to welcome Chris Middleton, Captain, retired Chris Middleton. Works at UWF. What's your title? Is it military liaison?
That's right. I am the President's military liaison at the University of West Florida. So I serve directly on Dr. Martha Saunders' staff.
Right.
Additionally, I am one of the staff members at our Innovation Institute, which is downtown. It's at the corner of Belmont and De Villiers.
Right.
Just north of the ballpark, actually, probably 8 or 10 blocks up from Blue Wahoo Stadium in a historic part of town. And so the innovation work that that institute hosts is a client service should a company or organization need an opportunity to step away for strategic planning, design thinking, teamwork seminars of that sort. We lead innovation internally at the university. Should a member of one of the 5 colleges want to access us with the facilitating skills that we have that are professionally acquired in our case. And so that is the innovation piece, and so I'm dual-hatted up there, and I work directly for the president as well.
Right. So, but your background is with the military, and we are using that experience here at the Chamber with the West Florida Defense Alliance, which you are the chair of. Tell us a little bit about your history and how you ended up in Pensacola.
Sure. And Todd, thank you. Lico as well. Glad to share the table with you here. Certainly glad to be on the Toddcast, and excited to talk further about the West Florida Defense Alliance, some of our current work and our goals and ambitions as well. My personal story is one of a Navy career path that got my family and I back to Pensacola, and we are glad to be back here and make Pensacola our home. It was a long-term goal of ours.
Good.
So we love Pensacola, and we're glad to be back.
We're glad you're here.
So my Navy story and my family story are intertwined. My wife and I met each other here. She's from near Baton Rouge, and we had friends in common that were dating, and that's how we ended up getting a chance to meet each other. We have been together throughout my Navy career, 25 years and a whole bunch of deployments, 3 children along the way. I think we've had about 12 addresses. You lose count at some point.
Right.
We've had short moves as little as 10 months between addresses, and you don't even unpack the boxes.
Yeah,
those moments. My wife Bridget and I were blessed with a great series of assignments to locations from the West Coast and the Seattle area to Hawaii, New England, D.C., Tennessee. But we started here. I was in flight school at the time, and as you get somewhere along in that career path, you start figuring out where do you want to end up. And Pensacola was, I tell people, by a order of magnitude, our first choice. So when we were, with the good fortune and the help of a few, we were able to get ourselves back here to a final assignment at the Naval Education and Training Command. But flying for the Navy and all that time on aircraft carriers was a great lifestyle. Certainly meaningful work across our planet, and delighted to bring in that first career and chapter of retirement in the Navy, bring it back here to Pensacola and make it go forward in another line.
Right. So where were you flying?
EA-6Bs is a A6 variant. It was for electronic warfare, and I went through that path, and then that particular aircraft transitioned to a variant of the F-18 Hornet. And then I flew that until finished up my career.
Okay, great. Nice. And so you retired how long ago?
2000. It's been just over 2 years.
Okay.
About 27 months ago.
Okay.
And even the retirement process is something we can share in the Defense Alliance.
Right.
So I tell people as we went through our final assignment, and then you get to, if you're lucky, you get to choose your hometown, and if you're really lucky, your hometown's awesome,
right.
like Pensacola.
Right.
And you get to choose that, and then the process itself, the exiting process. How do you go from being an active duty service member for 25 plus years to an employed member of your community, and all that goes with that? It is the first time you've done it, and I've told people, I go, it's not unlike the first time you flew.
Right.
You get to the line where you're going to retire, and it's something you've never done before.
Right.
You feel like you're very experienced, but you don't know anything about retirement because you've never done it before. And so certainly it's a story all its own that we can share in transitioning veterans. It's a role at the University of West Florida because we have such a strong support network in our Military and Veteran Resource Center. We call that MVRC.
Okay.
We've got about 3,000 active duty veteran reservists, spouses, dependent children in our ranks up there. University of West Florida has about 13,000 students.
Okay.
And we're glad to help that cohort, which is about a quarter of our entire student body up there. We're delighted to help them in their own veteran transition and their own veteran journey as well.
Right. Yeah. So talk about your role at UWF. I mean, you help with the veterans that are coming out, and whether they're coming to UWF to take classes or work into the community. But you do. I mean, I know I see you everywhere and doing a lot of different things. So talking about kind of the full scope of what you do.
Sure. And I'll borrow a page from our university president. So Dr. Martha Saunders talks about being a military-centric university. In this part of our region in the state of Florida, about 40% of the economy is federal and military, which is a big chunk of the economy. And if you go over towards Fort Walton Beach, where the University of West Florida has an additional campus in Fort Walton Beach, they're about mid-60s, nearly 70% military and federal economy over there as well. So a big footprint. And so the University of West Florida prioritizes its support to military matters, be they veteran support, veteran adjustment, maybe in transition to something as important as military dependent, a nominal aged 18-year-old university freshman that's arriving, perhaps from a military family. Perhaps they're coming from an assignment in Japan or Europe, and they've arrived. So we run a military veteran resource center. That center has its own director, and it sees, I think last year they saw over 7,000 walk-ins.
Wow.
And so we maintain a service center, a service desk, and a series of services from using your 9/11 GI Bill, be you the member or the spouse or the dependent. We can help you process the paperwork. There's a little bit of a burden to access your benefits, to providing a community, a military community within our larger student community. We can help arrange and create the smaller communities that matter to an individual. Perhaps it's just a couple of military spouses that want to get together, or perhaps folks that are sharing the same academic journey within one of our colleges or one of our specific majors.
Okay.
Additionally, we have a graduate school, and so they might be in the graduate school, and so that's important to us to create a space. And we've enjoyed some ranked success. We don't chase our awards or trophies, but we certainly are proud of them when they do come in, and we've been privileged to be recognized nationally for our veteran service. But the Military Veteran Resource Center and its director and all of its success is a piece of the University of West Florida's military effort across a couple other lines. We have an Army ROTC unit. And the Army ROTC unit is run by a most capable lieutenant colonel with a lot of flight time. That lieutenant colonel's spouse is combat proven herself with a lot of flight time. We're lucky to have those kind of leaders that the unit can draw in nationally, and they want to be assigned here. Additionally, we have an Air Force ROTC unit, and that Air Force ROTC unit shares its campus with the University of Southern Alabama. So we've got That's routine for ROTC units to share multiple campuses. It's not unusual. It's not unusual that they're in 2 different states. So we've got those Army and Air Force presence. Sometimes folks ask, why don't you have a Navy ROTC unit? And I say, well, when you're the home of the Blue Angels, the big Navy probably doesn't think we need to have more Navy presence. And so we are within our state university system to include the Gainesville-based big University of Florida. And then the regional Floridas are ourself, University of West Florida, University of North Florida, Central Florida, University of South Florida. Within that, we have some Navy ROTC units to include the one over at FAMU, shares its campus with FSU. And if you're at Tallahassee Community College, certainly that all plays together. And if you go over to Gainesville itself, there's a unit there. So those are our ROTC units. I've explained to you the Military and Veteran Resource Center, really a flagship of service to veteran and veteran families. Right. And then my own role in the President's office at the executive level, we're executing the President's strategy every day. She has a simple set of priorities that are easy to follow. Number one is students. So if that veteran is a student, well, that's our first priority. And it could be anything from registration to registrar matters and class schedules. It could be something as important as veteran health or veteran counseling, veteran adjustment. It could be just assistance in having a place to be. Her second priority is in her own professional staff. So we worry about our own advancements as a profession, be they experientials. Perhaps I can bring people that would not otherwise be on a base onto a base. Be they experts, our PhD level instructors and professors, or our deans and our academic leadership, all the way to the executive level. We may have visitors in town. We may have somebody from the governor's office, or one of the executive offices. So that's that professional development and exposure. We care in another priority a whole line about academic programming and research, because part of being a university is furthering knowledge, and so you don't sit on what you know now, but you work hard. So having somebody at the federal and military level that can see federal priorities, the federal government releases research priorities, and you can imagine if they were unique to a defense matter like a competitor like China or Russia, perhaps it's about unmanned systems or it's about cybersecurity, and so we can inject ourselves in those processes. Perhaps they are lines of grants and proposals, or they could be as important as just hosting and getting the right people together. Right. And then from those 3 large strategic lines, we also care deeply about our community engagement. And that might be a place you've seen me more than once, is we most deliberately ensure that we are engaging our community, which we too are privileged to live in as a university, and we are privileged in a region to be associated with such a great part of the country. We believe as deeply in the region as a university as every other citizen does. And then her last priority is not unlike what we share with our installation commanders. We worry about our facilities and our infrastructure. We've got a huge chunk of acreage north of I-10. We've got numerous other assets throughout our downtown locations and our expanding downtown presence. We've got properties all over. You've seen us, and you see the flags flying, in different places. And then we've got our presence that goes all the way to Fort Walton Beach. And so in my role, we find ourselves reviewing how is our support in a place like Fort Walton Beach. What are we doing or not doing, in that case, for the Air Force presence? How can we better it? Who needs us? And then we align what is a very successful presence and production of those 5 colleges and all of those students that we grow and nurture into these amazing graduates and eventually, in some cases, graduate students and beyond. And how do we serve? How do we serve our community? How do we serve our professions? How do we advance ourselves with research? So that is how we see ourselves on the main campus, and then certainly in our downtown presence. Right.
And I know, well, that's your focus, but you're also involved. I see you in a number of meetings with the economic development in our region and what's happening with a lot of different organizations that are working on that. Talk about your involvement with those and how that sort of works with your position.
Of course. The life at a university includes its role in the fabric of the community it supports, and so we serve at the national level, the state level. We have members of both faculty and staff on boards, board chairs, and in chambers and affiliates of chambers.
Right.
Certainly how the Defense Alliance is arranged in our Greater Pensacola Chamber. And so in that case, my roles of late have been as the chair of the West Florida Defense Alliance, also as a member of the First Place Partners organization, and in a advisory role with subjects or entities like Florida West in its cybersecurity strategy. Florida West is an economic development alliance. EDAs, EDOs are organizations. And so participating is because we can see things at a certain scale, because we have the reach across both the state and the country in that particular academic line. We see ourselves future-facing. Certainly our research is always future-facing. That's the point of it. And it's important to be in the board level and the organization level. And then as a humble and satisfied citizen of Pensacola, my family and I, my wife and I, we certainly participate in any organization you can imagine. Fiesta Pensacola is a good example of a historic organization that is embedded in the city and in the greater area, and then certainly in school and church and those places as well.
Right. And I know you travel a good bit with all these different responsibilities you have. Talk about that a little bit. So
the travel is organized around the federal footprint, which is, as you can imagine, trips to D.C. And then from the Washington, D.C. trips, be they Capitol Hill or the Pentagon, in either the Department of Defense offices or perhaps another federal office, or on Capitol Hill advocating for such, to fleet and base concentration areas. So we may find ourselves in a Jacksonville or a Norfolk, perhaps in a cyber center elsewhere. That we in Pensacola are a large cybersecurity hub, but Augusta, Georgia is as well, and San Antonio and those kind of places. So we are in a competitive state, measuring and being relevant, and either advocating for next steps, bidding for next steps, putting in grants and proposals for next steps, partnering to reach whatever that ambition is. And so that DC travel is a piece of it. There are client-facing actions that span the country, from Atlanta to Dallas to Los Angeles, and then in our state, a leading state in our country, certainly a leading fiscal position. Probably I would advocate that the Florida Chamber and the Florida Defense Support Task Force and Space Florida and Enterprise Florida and Volunteer Florida are organizations which are accessible. The DEO, Department of Economic Opportunity, is accessible, and so we engage those organizations. We know what our piece of that role is in a university, and we can certainly partner across the federal sector, the bases, perhaps at a municipal level or even a private sector level. We partner, and we also serve on contracts. Part of universities is we work to maintain expertise, and then we are available in a contract format to help others with our expertise. So if we have something we can share, universities by design participate in the private sector.
Right. Okay. Wow. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's enough hours in the days in the week for you to do all that. That's pretty remarkable. Yeah. How do you do all that?
Well, thank you. All things are balanced, and I think we are lucky. I will tell you, as I am fortunate to travel, that in this town we are well organized. We are truly neighbors in a community, and we can find each other quickly. I think we trust each other in this town, and the opportunity to just manage the meaningful work across, be it a military objective, a university objective to be military centric or military serving or veteran serving. Sometimes those change. It could be a legislative indicator. It could be a funding indicator on something like the National Defense Authorization. That it could be a national defense strategy that says we're now worried about A instead of B. It could be robotics or unmanned vehicles, or it could be health and wellness of our troops.
Right.
Human factors, and we measure the difference across things like sports in military performance, because the military special forces would tell you they're interested in how the professional athletes can maintain themselves across an entire season. And certainly we share our ground here with Air Force Special Operations at Hurlburt Field just down the road.
Right.
And so it spans our 5 colleges. College of Health, certainly. We have a leading nursing program, a very much a leading nursing program. We're very proud of it. And we have our College of Business and all of the entrepreneurship programs we have there, in addition to the academic program. We have a veteran entrepreneurship program that's unique to veterans. And our College of Science and Engineering it includes the cybersecurity piece as well as the leading efforts in both engineering and in our core sciences. We have our College of Arts, Social Sciences, Humanities, and then our College of Education and Professional Services. So we're making all manner of citizens and future employees,
that we
maybe
want to
future employers for our entrepreneurs, and we want to keep them all here, that's for sure. So with all that, the West Florida Defense Alliance plays a role, I think, for the Chamber in that interface.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So you are the chair of the West Florida Defense Alliance. We've been really up and running for about a year and made a lot of progress. But, talk about that. Talk about some of the key issues that have been addressed and that we'll be looking at moving forward. Sure.
So the West Florida Defense Alliance is housed in the Greater Pensacola Chamber of Commerce Foundation. The Defense Alliance is one of many in the country. The Association of Defense Communities, ADC, is a parent organization of which all these alliances can arrange under. In Florida, we have a Florida Defense Alliance, which is a state-level alliance of which all these communities can gather under. And so I think it was important to our chamber and our chamber membership, the Greater Pensacola Chamber of Commerce, to have a defense alliance that worries about a 40 percentile measure of our economy. And so anytime you wake up in the morning and 40% of your eggs are in one basket, that matters. And so the Department of Defense and the federal levels are well organized around telling communities what they need and telling communities what they want. And we focus on the fact that there's a 40% economy, which measures $9 billion across the 2 counties. But the fabric of a community, that employment matters. The economic impact of those dollars matter. They create the fabric of what is good here, at least 40% of it. And so the Defense Alliance, as a matter of the Chamber, worries about those military missions for which that funding line is associated. We worry about mission growth, and we have good guidance. We do reach at the national level to that Association of Defense Communities. We can see the state level, and we can listen to our own Florida Defense Alliance on what they're seeing, maybe at the state legislature level, or now that we're in session. In the recording of this particular podcast, it's January, so we're in session, and that matters all the way back to our local economy. So we're serving our citizens by maintaining a West Florida Defense Alliance and organizing it under the Chamber around some simple tenets. The West Florida Defense Alliance exists to ensure the existing missions on our various bases and to advocate for those activities that will sustain and grow those missions. So if we can see a technology growth in a particular base, we may need to carry that message over to our education system, maybe our private sector partners. Maybe there's some kind of commercial funding thing we want to talk about. But I think sharing the intelligence of what we've read or know or have reviewed, and then assembling and aggregating that data for good use of our chamber members is the role of the Defense Alliance. And so we have organized around 4 groups, and then they can flex. We started off with our 4 groups, which were our public-private partnerships. The Air Force probably led this first some 5+ years ago in what was public-private partnerships and the energy behind partnering with your communities. All the services have certainly followed suit. There are complex agreements, words like intergovernmental service agreements or what have you, support agreements. That's not important to our basic membership because it's our job to discern or distill with the complexities of those agreements. But if we can create a public-private partnership or a public-private partnership and so forth, perhaps we can share training. A good example of partnerships, and then I'll move on to the others, will be something like, what if the base has a piece of property or a range, something like a small arms pistol range that their security forces use. Maybe our sheriffs or police officers in Pensacola or Milton or any of our cities would want to share that. There's a way to borrow that. There's a way to share firefighting training, medical training.
Right.
There's a way to share technology, and you have to have a purpose for it. But there are ways to do that. So we want to improve that community relationship. It's not one way, of course. Our community is a wonderful supporter base. So we find ourselves going, what can we do for you? What do your families need? And it could be something like spouse employment or some kind of employment clearinghouse effect. So those are what partnerships look like. We do track our family readiness. So goes the family, so goes the military member. And so the military will take care of that military member. It's the community's role, or at least it's how the Defense Alliance sees it, to help with that family readiness charter. And so can we help with information? How do you enroll your child, and if you've moved here and you're military dependent? Can we help you in family readiness via healthcare, or perhaps you have a license or a profession that you're trying to get a job for as a spouse? Can we make sure you understand all of the quality of life that we have to offer, and therefore you have a higher quality of life, kids are happy, family's happy, spouse is happy, perhaps they perform better in their active duty, and perhaps our community benefits from their long-term thing. We also are worried about our workforce and how can we grow our own organic workforce via our own assets, be they K-12, state colleges, universities, trade and vocational pathways. But how can we create a workforce that employers and others can access for their own contracting and so forth? And then we do worry about technology. We have wonderful technology partners, both in content providers, the actual bandwidth providers across the spectrum of those companies. And so can we share if we know that there's growth, or can we share if we see a mission opportunity? Can we turn around and tell that to a provider, or can we partner in what is in technology growth? So the Defense Alliance has working groups that are embedded in the community, bridging that role between the community and the military in order to better the military's position and certainly better our position in the end.
Yeah. And one of the things that's so encouraging to me is that the people we have that are heading up those working groups, I mean, the talent that we have, retired Admiral Don Quinn, Dr. Vic Hall from Baptist. I mean, these are true community leaders and experts that are guiding us.
That's right. We are lucky in the fact that in our area we have attracted very senior officers to this area in what is their next chapter after their own service retirements. And we are lucky to have Rear Admiral Hall and Rear Admiral Quinn as their working group leads, and then Mr. Bob Foster, former Army service member who has gone on to commercial jobs and his own ventures and startups, and he leads entrepreneurship in some capacity up at the university. And so we're lucky to have multiple services represented, and certainly the Defense Alliance, we're lucky to have other senior officers that attend those meetings and can provide us senior insight, which allows us to steer ourselves, our community, our preparedness for how can we serve our bases and our installation, how can we help our installations become more mission ready, more resilient, ready for mission growth, and then turn around, and that bolsters our economy for many years into the future. So we're glad to serve in that role as a Defense Alliance. We appreciate membership and its turnout as we've seen to date, and we have a series of items we'd like to provide as a service going forward to our members. More communication, more visibility to the activities beyond what is maybe current. If you think in your own head, what do I know about the base or bases? Have I ever visited the base, or have I only been to one base? Do I even know where the others are? All bases have offerings. All bases have reasons to visit, and even within the 2-county region that the West Florida Defense Alliance supports, there are military properties, waterfronts, and bulkheads. We have a significant Coast Guard presence. And so it's fun and easy to look out the window and see the Blue Angels flying by, and certainly point to that and go, man, that's great. It is equally great to haul your extended family every summer when they come visit you, because you live in Florida and at the beach. So, of course, your extended family comes, and so you take them to the museum on the main base. There is obviously so much more than that to our footprint. The Coast Guard story is a great one that we've been selected. We have good facilities. We have a good port. The base itself has a good waterfront. Those that may remember, there was a training carrier there a long time ago, and so that pier is built to house large ships, and the Coast Guard has selected us, we believe, for 5 ships in its future. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, different than DOD. They are not part of DOD, but they have for many years now maintained a footprint over on Corey Station. There are some other agencies in what is in intelligence and information gathering that probably pass through the area. Certainly at Corey Station, there's other footprints over there. Softly Field maintains a presence that's joint use with some other agencies. And then Whiting Field, because it's the Santa Rosa County piece of the West Florida Defense Alliance, is really leading the nation in what is a land partnership around its Whiting Aviation Park. And so we in the Defense Alliance, as we look across 2 counties and in what is the larger federal investment, we worry about what those bases need to be successful. We can certainly advocate. We can educate. And in some cases, it's our access. Because if you haven't seen it, we'll take you there. We'll arrange for that. Uniquely, because the alliance, the West Florida Defense Alliance, is nested in the Greater Pensacola Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerces are accessible to active duty uniformed leaders. So federal ethics may or may not allow a uniformed member to access a particular company for instance, and that's totally appropriate. Government ethics wants everything fair, and they don't want a particular leader giving access to perhaps one company instead of the other, or something to make a sort of a short story of it. But in the case of a Chamber of Commerce, it is representing its membership and the citizenry, and the uniformed members are allowed and welcomed to come. And so we have enjoyed a series of briefs from a series of base leaders and that has become routine.
Right.
It is valued. Those uniformed leaders don't have a lot of free time, and the privilege that they'll come out and brief the West Florida Defense Alliance on their priorities, their needs, and the simple, hey, this is my ask. I certainly can't get it funded, and I'm not asking you to do that either, but I'm telling you, I'm sharing you as a neighbor. Here are some things I'm thinking about, and that insight is so valuable for us as we message across the Florida Defense Support Task Force, the Florida Defense Alliance, places where we might be able to talk to our governor and their leaders. Things like the lieutenant governor who chairs the Florida Cybersecurity Task Force, she comes to town, and the task force comes to town. So just the ability to represent ourselves, our community, our missions, and our incredible value of our bases and all that they can do.
Yeah, and that's something that you do in your role as chairman of the West Florida Defense Alliance, or
correct,
WFDA, as we like to say. And also your role at UWF is you go to Tallahassee, you go to D.C. When you're D.C., you go to the Pentagon.
That's right.
You go to our elected officials, Congressman Gates's office or Senator Scott's office. You go to meetings across the state, whether they're Florida Chamber of Commerce or Florida Defense Alliance meetings. I mean, you are interacting with the leaders in all of these different fields and representing us, our community, our two counties, and the $9 billion investment, and finding out what are the things that are happening on the state, on the federal level that we need to know about, but also taking, okay, these are things that we need locally, and be able to take that to our elected officials or to Pentagon leadership and say, these are the things that we're seeing on the ground. These are the asks that we have, and get in front of those key decision makers. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. The thought here is it is a team sport, and I would offer that the collaborative nature of a defense alliance, in our case, the West Florida Defense Alliance, allows us to gather as a community. A privilege to chair that group. That community has a chance to express its strengths and maybe some of its opportunities. We can intelligently bounce that against what we can read in terms of defense authorization acts or defense strategies, perhaps some defense news coming out. As a community, again, it's a team sport. We can access within the limits of what private sector can share, maybe what their priorities are or what their investments are going to be in a base or an infrastructure or something to further a future mission. We are fortunate across the state of Florida to have a very strong defense presence, and so the Defense Alliance as a structure can allow us to access other leaders, and you can imagine the strength of the retired senior leaders that span our state.
Right.
And so the ability to carry forward a message from our chamber or our base or our installation, or maybe an observed concern of ours, or an ambition. It's not always broken. It's something we really think we want to do.
Right.
We had in this past year addressed what was the growth of the U.S. Space Force, the Office of the Governor that has Space Florida as part of it. So those are ambitions. There's certainly nothing broken there.
Right.
And so the opportunity to access in this team approach the other senior leaders. And so in what is a community network, if we're headed to D.C. as a team, we can access our own. It could be a personal or professional network, but it could also be senior leaders in our own defense alliance or senior leaders of the private sector that are in our defense alliance that are saying, hey, if you're headed that way, I need you to go see a particular party or have a meeting or provide information so that person can then consider the priority.
Right.
So it's not always an influence campaign. Sometimes it's just sharing information that's we assemble that much information, and maybe it's faster if we can brief you on exactly what we're doing here in Northwest Florida and our adjacent neighbors as far as Mobile and all the way to Gulfport or Pascagoula for sure. So in that team sport, we can go to Orlando or Tampa or Jacksonville, Miami, West Palm, all of the places we may be where there is a defense or a defense supplier, a defense contract presence, mission presence, and work across what we consider our lines and priorities, that family readiness and resilience piece, the veteran spouse employment piece, workforce in general, certainly our partnership piece. So in the end, our outcomes are our base is more ready. Our bases are ready for mission growth. Our bases are aware of technologies and enablers that create the leading edge of what is military service, military training, military operations, deployed operations across the spectrum of the services here. We train far beyond just the Navy around here. Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, significant presence, but in this two-county region, we've got deployed and very special operators across the Air Force and the Army as well. So we've got all 5 services, and certainly the Department of Homeland Security is a partner as well. So, when we travel, it is a team sport, and we're accessing members of our team that are in residence. If we go to Orlando, we're reaching out to people we may already know. We have the ability to work with other defense alliances and partner. So it is fun work. It is very positive work. It involves partnerships and collaborations. These are things universities do well also. It's kind of nice to come from a university and then serve in the Defense Alliance role as well. And in the end, our desired outcome is strong bases that come from strong communities. And mission growth when it is available going forward. I mean, we're in the year 2020. We're already looking out 10 years. And it's important to be looking forward.
Absolutely. And sometimes those asks in terms of what is needed, really, it can't come from the base. It has to come from the community. And so to have this organization and to have these people who are engaged in, you leading, these meetings and these trips and having those opportunities to try to influence these decisions is so important for our community.
Well, thank you. And we know that communicating
that seems to be the big word.
It's a challenge all its own. There's a lot of information to share. 40% of an economy in an area is probably too much for any one of us to fully understand. And the opportunity to get in rooms together and share it, or get on the road together and advocate for it, or truly put a working group together to execute a particular project or program, to bid into a program or a grant in some cases, which we do and continue to do well with ambitions to grow that for sure, are all roles that in the end bring us a strong economy, an insured economy, and a stronger community, which again, it is a privilege to live here. And on these trips as you return home and having been in all the time zones, it is fun to want to come back to the one you're in. And I'm not sure everybody is as blessed as we are to want to come home to whatever that, wherever they live. And in our case, you can't wait to get back and then gather what you need and get back out in the field and continue to serve.
Yeah, I know we are fortunate, and what we're trying to do to improve and make stronger for our military and our community, and these issues, and you mentioned this, these aren't just military issues; these are really community issues at the end of the day. So we're, through these efforts, we're improving the community at large, while supporting and protecting and hopefully expanding our military missions.
I think you bring up a good point that in a case of a military footprint, a military base, our military reflects our society. And so the concerns that a base might have may very well be shared or mirrored in a community. So bases want good, safe places for families with good schools and activities for children, and good employment for spouses, and good career opportunities for the wage earners.
Absolutely.
And so does the community.
Yeah.
So I think that is a pleasant place to work together, because it's certainly shared. It is forward-facing and ambitious, and it creates the conditions for further growth and further success. Likewise, all the things I just mentioned are hard.
Yeah.
It doesn't come
work.
Easy. Right.
It
If it was easy, everybody would do it.
Right, exactly.
And in our case, it requires the lift of an entire community, the leadership of an entire community, and it's across the spectrum of a community, from schools and faith-based organizations to private sector employers and the endorsement of public sector employers, and all of the community engagement that notably here I think is richer and more energetic, perhaps. Maybe we're just the right size that we can see across our community and actually see where the activity is, so that's a privilege all its own. Yeah. And then going forward, we see ourselves in a growth phase. We don't have any indicators otherwise. We at the university see the same across the region, in the state. The state is a leading state in our nation across a host of economic indicators. And so being ready for that is an important part of this work. Yeah, absolutely. And preparing ourselves for it. We are lucky in our support functions. We are lucky and appreciative at the West Florida Defense Alliance level. We have investors that have helped us to create some operating conditions that we would not otherwise be able to fund. We are lucky in the chamber. I guess you make your own success, but robust membership and growing, and that shows great purpose. But the partnership and the genuine support, the investors being a good example, that's real support. And it creates real outcomes, real presence in be it Tallahassee or one of the large cities in Florida, or with one of the suppliers or manufacturers or defense contractors, perhaps either in our state or elsewhere. And so, we appreciate the support the West Florida Defense Alliance has received. Some of it has been organizational, some of it has been individual. There are a lot of folks that have put a lot of time into this, and it's been personal time, be it in person in meetings or on the phone. There are folks that have created connections and opportunities for us to reach to places quickly. And I think that's accelerated our work. So we have strong basis and a strong community, but we intend to ensure that. Yeah, absolutely. Going forward. Absolutely.
So anything, you got any closing thoughts? I've covered a lot today, but anything you want to add?
Sure. The West Florida Defense Alliance is part of the Greater Pensacola Chamber. It's specifically housed under the Chamber's foundation, and the Defense Alliance is open in its meetings and welcoming of all input. There is no line of input we won't accept. We appreciate your critiques as well, and perhaps you'll point something out that we're not seeing. And the access point for the Defense Alliance is right here at the Chamber. Debbie Graham is the Vice President for Military Affairs, but if they can't reach Debbie, you and I are certainly available. Absolutely. Always, at all times. And but the Chamber website can get you to the Defense Alliance, and we welcome all attendees going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a community effort, and we want everyone involved. So it's one of our core missions here at the Chamber, and we want to do everything we can to make it successful. So just really excited that we were able to get you on today. Captain Chris Middleton, appreciate everything you do for our community, UWF, with West Florida Defense Alliance, economic development, veterans affairs, everything. It's really tremendous. So appreciate you being on.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor to be on the Toddcast.
Right. And I also want to thank Lico Crump, making us sound and look good. As always, and appreciate everything you do for us at the Chamber, Lico.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. It really is an honor to be able to serve the community and be part of everything that you all are doing every day. So
awesome. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll catch you all next time on the Toddcast.
Thanks for listening to this edition of the Toddcast. To learn more, check out the Greater Pensacola Chamber's Facebook page and follow us on Twitter at ToddcastPCola. That's Toddcast, letter P, colon. We hope you join us again next time on the Toddcast.